So learning Linux can be a little daunting, and today I want to go through a 4-week beginner flow that I would consider a good way to start learning Linux for those of us who are just not comfortable switching over to Linux or even spending time in Linux. How do you even approach this? There's so much to explore, so much to do. Well, let's really break it down and take it one step at a time. There's been a lot of new members on the channel with well over 1 million views this month alone, and I want to try and help some of the newer users who are just coming to Linux or trying to explore it now that they found the channel, really get over the hurdle and start really trying out Linux. The first step is always, we won't even call it the first step, we'll call it step 0. You really need to install Linux somewhere. This comes with things like, well, choosing a Linux distro, installing it either in something like a virtual machine, a VM, or dual booting alongside Windows, or perhaps even a standalone installation. Now, personally, I would choose VM if you can, because it's just easier to manage, access, and screw up on while you're still getting the hang of not only the environment and the operating system itself, but also things like the terminal where you can mess things up. And it doesn't become a big deal if it's a virtual machine. It's really easy to create snapshots, go back in time, all that fun stuff. Second best thing is to dual boot. A lot of us use Windows because, let's face it, Linux is not one-to-one compatible with Windows in running the same application, so a lot of us still have to run Windows. And this allows you to go between the two environments. You can load up whatever Linux distribution you want alongside Windows, so if you want to choose to use one versus the other, this is a nice experience because you actually get to use your full-fledged hardware and get a full-fledged performance experience from Linux, although it's a little harder than using a virtual machine. Now, the one I do not recommend is just doing Linux standalone. Unless you have a dedicated piece of hardware for that, then yes, that would be a good experience for you. But it becomes way too daunting to just, from the beginning, install Linux and it be your only operating system because you will be missing applications that you could run on Windows, and it's going to come at the worst time for you. So why create that pressure on yourself? A lot of people stop here at step 0 just because they create too much pressure on themselves. That's why I want to break this down into a 4-week or learn Linux in 30 days type of segment. I'm going to go through a beginner flow, or at least how I think people should approach learning Linux at the first time. Of course, there's going to be a lot of people in the comment section suggesting their own ways of approaching this, and there's a lot of ways that are valid. So definitely look down in the comment section a little bit. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to break these things down because I have a ton of videos on this channel, over 600 at this point, and I cover these topics in depth in other videos. So if you ever get lost or you're intimidated by a portion of how to approach using Linux for the first time, well, now hopefully you can get comfortable by following a plan. And I'm not kidding when I say I have just about every Linux distro install video. Again, I'll post the ones that I enjoy using. We're going to talk about which ones I suggest using here, at least for beginners when it comes to Linux distributions. But I have an Arch Linux step-by-step installation. I have ones for Ubuntu or Debian. Zorin has been a big favorite of mine lately. Again, I'm going to post this in the description below. Also, I have VM installs as well. So no matter which path you want to take, there's going to be a video for you if you need it. But that's not what this video is actually about. So back to step 0. One big problem is people just choosing a Linux distro. This is really the starting point. So you're going to spend some time in the first week just getting Linux installed. On the first day, really just focus on looking through different websites. Find one that really has a layout that you like, and you're going to figure this out by finding a Linux distro. Let's just set a few of them. Ubuntu, Linux Mint, or Zorin OS. Those are the 3 I would suggest for beginners. So let's not complicate things. Let's stick to one of these 3. Now, a bunch of people in the comment section are going to suggest their favorites, which is great. You can also check those out, but at the end of the day, these instructions and 4-week beginner flow is going to apply to all of them. For example, I'm actually going to use Zorin OS for this video. I've been using it quite a bit lately. I really enjoy the design, the layout, and just how easy it has been to use, especially when you're coming from Windows. It really has that look and feel like Windows. And a lot of people are coming from Windows to Zorin as it celebrates its 1 millionth download of Zorin OS 18, which is a big deal, as a lot of people are actually coming from Windows over to Zorin. And they even have a Pro Edition, which is not what you want, at least not right off the cuff. It's about 48 bucks, and what that does for you is gets you better features, more layouts, ones like Mac OS, if you like Mac OS for whatever reason, Windows 11, Chrome OS, the classic Windows, so on and so forth. There's a lot, right? But that's not what you want. You really just want the core version of Zorin OS. How do you get that? Easy. You go to Zorin OS and you just hit download Zorin OS. The Pro will probably be the first one you see. You just go down and you select the free download of Zorin 18 Core. But before we do this, we want to check out what things look like. Go to the overview page, look at what the desktop environment looks like, read through what they offer and why it's so great. Every single distribution is going to have their own web page where they describe why they're so great and why you should be choosing them. But I settled on Zorin here. I'm going to give you a bit of a comparison across the three, as the main things I've looked at is always look and feel. This is important to me. I gotta like the layout. I gotta like the way I can navigate and go through my operating system. I'm also gonna look at beginner friendliness because, well, this is kind of for beginners, or at least people starting to explore Linux. Also, if it's necessary, you want to look for performance on older hardware. If you're installing this on an older machine, you don't want a super bloated experience where it's just going to take up a bunch of your resources just to run an operating system. That's a no-go for most. And finally, community. How big is the community and how many different people are willing to help you with the operating system? Is there a big community with a lot of support or not? So I'm going to say Zorin OS is best if you're coming from something like Windows or Mac OS because it will feel more familiar. It has a Windows-like layout option that's polished and integrations with things like OneDrive and even some out-of-the-box executable support, so you can run executables while installing something like Wine. We're not going to get into what that is, but just know that out of the box, it has an easy way to toggle on running executables from Windows. Then you have Linux Mint. This is best if you want something that just works. It also has a Windows style desktop and, again, minimal surprises, and is very popular for beginners. It also has a high focus on stability, so there's not a bunch of new flashy stuff all the time that breaks. Instead, very stable, has a great community, and a lot of new people use it. And finally, Ubuntu. It's going to be the best if you want the default Linux experience because it has a huge community, and this is where you're going to get probably the most community support just because all the tutorials are pretty much based around Ubuntu, and it has a very long-term stable big company called Canonical that supports it, so it's here to stay. But it does not have a look or feel like Windows or a layout like you see here in Zorin. Instead, it uses something called the GNOME desktop. Check that out. And this is probably the biggest deterrent, I would say, for people, at least coming from Windows, not to use Ubuntu. But if you want a true Linux experience with a whole new desktop environment and just a whole new look and feel, Ubuntu is an absolutely great Linux distribution as well for beginners. Okay, I chose Zorin OS, the Core Edition, which just means free. And that's what I have installed here. There are so many guides out there for every specific Linux distribution. Just type in how to install X Linux distro on, and then put either dual boot behind it, standalone behind that, or on a VM. And you'll find guides. Again, I highly suggest you use a virtual machine to start out. And if you want something that's free, I highly suggest VirtualBox, which you can get for Windows or Mac OS, and then run virtual machines all for free, as long as you have enough hardware to do that. You're gonna have to do a little exploring on your own for that. Again, I have plenty of videos for that. They'll be posted below if you want to install a Linux distribution as a virtual machine. Once you get past choosing a Linux distribution and actually installing it, we can finally start our 4-week journey, and you've already made it to a massive milestone. It's just being able to get into a Linux distribution and start using Linux like a normal operating system. Let's talk about what we should do in week 1 of our 4-week journey. In week 1, let's take things slow. We want to just get used to using our new environment. And that's going to take a little bit because we want to get comfortable here. There's potentially a new browser for you, a new way to navigate through files and settings, and there's a lot to explore. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to explore. And how do we explore? Well, let's just start going around the system and looking at things like the browser. You're going to have some sort of a default browser depending on whatever Linux distribution you have selected. For example, this one has Brave. It's a Chromium-based browser. Just use whatever the defaults are for now. We'll get into installing things at a later date. So use the browser, check out files, and get familiar with the home users directory, because the navigation is a little different than what you would find in, for example, Windows, where you pretty much start at the C drive as your root directory. Well, we start with something called /, which just stands for the root directory here on Linux. You got to get used to it for a little bit. Also, like a users directory, we have something called home and then the users. But anyways, we won't get too far down that rabbit hole quite yet. We'll explore this in a moment. Let's continue on talking about what other things to look at. Look at settings, right? We want to set up a good look and feel for us. If we're going to come back to this operating system day in and day out, we want it to look and feel the way we like our operating system to look and feel. So we got to explore the settings and what's available, how we can change things. And besides that, the last thing is we'll load up a terminal, which again can be very challenging to people. When they hear terminal, they think, oh, lots of commands. Now I'm getting really deep in the weeds, all that fun stuff. Well, I can't understate how important the terminal is in Linux. It's one of the things that actually drives people to use Linux because it can make tasks so much easier, including things like managing files, users, services, but also installing specific packages and even versions of those packages, all with one line. It makes administration and use of your operating system even more efficient and fun to do. Where it can take many executables to install something on Windows, it typically takes only one command to do it in Linux, so it really becomes a power tool. It also allows you to look at things at a deeper level. Where Windows babies you, Linux does not. It allows you to look past any veil and at any system or subsystem that you want and have full control over your system. So you're probably like, Nick, why in the first week am I gonna access the terminal? No, you're just gonna load it once. That's all you're doing on the first week. We're not gonna touch it at all. So let's start investigating some of these things. That way you're not just stuck on week one. I don't think there's a lot to do here, but make it exciting for yourself. Explore, find things that I didn't look at, right? So if you're using Zorin with me, great. If you're not, it's all gonna be the same. It's just a part of the exploration process. That's what we're focused on week one. I'm gonna load things like the start menu, look around, get used to where I can launch applications from, and just the overall layout. Where's the user space? Here it is. The user, I can click on user. What does that load? Okay, I can change my password. I can unlock and lock settings. Great. I click again and what's in graphics? Well, it comes with LibreOffice Draw. I might load this application and look at what Draw is. I'm gonna look at internet. I have Ramina here, which is something that allows me to remotely control other desktops. Great. Web applications, run websites as if they were applications. This is good for stuff like running Word or Excel, all on the web. Great. Brave web browser. Again, let's load the default web browser. Start exploring that. Maybe put in a couple sites. Make sure that it's updated and upgraded. It says Brave is out of date, so I'm going to go install updates for it. And then I'm going to start using it. Just get used to what comes default here. Later down the line, I can use this browser to install another browser, or better yet, do it through the App Store. But we're not ready for that. So again, keep exploring. Another thing I want you to check out is your file browser or manager. This is very much the same as your file explorer in Windows. It's going to look very similar. It's more condensed though. And quite honestly, I think it's a better layout. What you'll notice on the left-hand side here is you have a home, which is the home users directory, meaning whatever user you're logged in with, it has their desktop, their documents, downloads, music, pictures, public, templates, and videos. This is just typical like you would find on Windows as well. Just remember in the file browser on the left-hand side, you have very much these same things. And this is just per user. If you were logged into a different user, you couldn't access the same desktop, documents, downloads folder, so on and so forth, as they're broken down per user. And that's really it. You're not accessing any of the root or what would be equivalent to the C drive location on Windows. You're just accessing your user files and folders. So go ahead and look through. Everything should be empty, although I have installed and downloaded a few things myself here. Anyways, look at music, pictures, so on and so forth, right? You shouldn't have anything for the most part. Looks like I do have a few templates here that came standard. Anyways, videos, great. And then notice trash, right? If you have something that you want to get rid of, for example, I do have a few downloads things, right? How do I do that? Let's see. Looks like I can right click and move to trash. Now, does that completely get rid of it? Probably not. Let's go to trash. Sure enough, just like Windows, you got to empty it once more. And now again, I'm just getting used to using the layout of whatever Linux distribution I have chosen for myself. I'm also going to look at things on the bottom on any of the bars that might show up on the screen. Click the icon, look at what they do. Clearly this is for workspaces and I can toggle between them, right? Just like you can on Windows. Then to the right of that, I have more options, right? My wired or wireless connection options. I might look at that. I can toggle on dark style. Here's a power mode. If I have a laptop, I can switch my power modes, maybe check that out. Take pictures, lock the screen, shut down, log out, and all the rest of the fun stuff. Right of that, I have my calendar and notification. Fantastic. Now, I'm not going to go through everything that's available here in Zorin. I have other videos for that. I also have it for almost every other Linux desktop environment. So if you're stuck trying to find something, go check out those videos. I'll post those in the checklist that you can find in the description to really go go through these steps and check them off yourself so you can feel like you're getting accomplished over the next month. Again, we're still focused here on week 1. We're going to move to week 2 here in a moment, but another important spot that you have to look at is figure out how to get to your settings. Notice right here, I have access to settings. Great. Sometimes you got to right click and hit settings. Sometimes you go down to the bar and you hit settings, right? Just find a way to get to the system setting. If you have to, use the search bar to find settings. This is where you're going to get to play around with the look and feel of the system. Spend a day doing this. As I open settings up, I notice that there's just a ton of things that I can access, right? My mouse and touchpad, keyboard, colors, appearance is a big one here in Zorin OS. If I launch the Zorin appearance, I can change out my layouts, theme things, get effects going, change up how my desktop looks and what icons are available, or if I even have icons on the back, change up my window placement, set up interfaces and fonts. There's just a lot to go through. Definitely 2 things to check out is wallpaper or appearance settings and display settings. Make sure you're fully utilizing your monitor on Linux. Make sure you have the correct resolution and refresh rate. Adjust the scaling as necessary, and maybe even toggle on that dark mode so you can see if the light or dark mode is better for you. I personally love the way the dark mode looks here in Zorin OS. So now we've accomplished quite a bit. At this point, start browsing the web, watch YouTube, maybe find one of the videos on the channel, see if everything's working correctly. That just means, are things rendering and you don't have any issues with video? This could be a key to telling you that there's something wrong with the drivers that are installed. Again, if you have a virtual machine, things might go a little slower, so be patient. You can also try and open up pictures, download something from the web, create a text document and save it on the desktop. So for example, I want to make sure that I can use any of the text editors. So I'm going to type in text. And look, I have this text editor and I have LibreOffice Writer. So I'm going to use the text editor and let me just write something out. And then I'm going to try to save it and then navigate somewhere here on the system to make sure I understand where it's going to exist. My first .text. Great. I'm going to put it in my documents folder and just hit save. And now I'm going to try navigating and finding where it's at. So I would imagine I want the file browser. I think I put it in documents and here it is, my first text. I'm going to launch it, make sure it launches with the same app. Again, look and feel and just using basic applications that come default with the operating system. That's what we're focused on the first week. Basic daily tasks. Spend, 2 to 3 days just doing this. So now we've officially installed things. That might take around, we'll call it 2 days. The next 2 to 3 days are going to be just exploring. And finally, on what we'll call the 6th day, let's check out the terminal. And this one's going to be easy. All I want you to do is try to find the terminal. The easiest way is typically just type in terminal. Almost every single Linux distribution will pop up something and let it load. This is what pops up if I type in terminal and I select that application. I get a blinking cursor and it says SavvyNik at SavvyNik. That's all I need to know. I've successfully opened it up. I can look at it. I'm not going to do anything special. I can exit out, or if you're feeling extra comfortable, just type exit and press enter. That's it. You spent your first week getting used to Linux. Now we're ready to move on to week 2 and talk about focus of what we're going to do in week 2. So with week 2, I want to now get comfy with the file system. I want to understand how it works and operates. I'm also going to figure out how to install and uninstall applications. For example, let's say I don't want to use Brave. I want to use a different browser. I need to know how to install a different browser and not through the terminal or some wild way to install this. I want to just do everything through the GUI experience or the graphical user interface experience, right? Basically how to use apps in order to install and uninstall other applications. I also want to now move some stuff over or into the operating system. Maybe create new files or move them in from a USB just to understand how to get things in and out of the operating system. And finally, we're going to talk about the terminal once more because we want to use it in a very simple way. All right, so with these in mind, let's actually talk about the file system. I'm going to open up my file browser manager just to get to understand the file system. Up here on the top, usually you're going to find some sort of a bar where you can type in locations. And notice we're in home SavvyNik. What does that mean? Well, it's pretty simple. This means root, the very first directory. Think of it as the trunk of a tree where you have branches coming off the tree, right? Well, the branches could be your directories. I'm just going to type in dir, also known as folders. Don't let that confuse you. And the trunk, we'll just call that root. So everything extends out from the trunk. It's the base of everything. That's where everything starts. And then all the little branches are going to be different directories or folders. And each of those directories and folders can also have their own sub branches, which are more directories and folders. That's kind of how to think of, well, at least the root directory relation, also known as just the trunk and branches of a tree. Anyways, so we're saying right here, we're currently in the root directory, the main directory. Then we're in the home directory, another slash. That means we're again in another directory that's based out of home, and we're in SavvyNik, which is known as the home users directory, right? This is home, and a user named SavvyNik exists in this home. And that's where you would find things like the desktop, right? These are all little branches: desktop, documents, downloads, music, pictures, public, templates, videos, all exist in the SavvyNik directory. Now you're like, why is this important? Well, it's because we can actually erase all of this and just type in that root or slash directory. And boom, we get so many more locations now. We have bin, boot, CD-ROM, dev, and you might be like, Nick, this is a lot. What does this all mean? Don't worry about it. There's plenty of videos explaining the breakdown of the Linux file system, and you don't need to understand it all right away. Just know these are the system directories and files that's needed to run the system, and they all stem from that slash or root directory. These all exist in the root directory, and I will talk about a couple of them real quick. For example, MNT means mount, and that's for things like USB drives or CD, DVD drives, all that fun stuff. Stuff that gets mounted to the system exists in mount. Dev stands for devices. So ancillary devices and drivers would exist in dev. Home, we already talked about. That's the home users directory. And that's where users like SavvyNik, George, or what have you exist. It's just people who can log into the system. Bin or binaries is an interesting one. That's where a lot of system applications run. And those are the applications that the system actually needs in order to run. So anyways, without getting too far down the rabbit hole, notice that to access these, I would do /mnt/dev/home/bin. That's it. That just means root directory. Then I want to go to the mount directory. Root directory, I want to go to dev directory. Root directory, I want to go home. Root directory, I want to go to the bin directory. That's it. That's all. If you're feeling brave at this point, you can click on one of these and see what's inside. This looks like a mess, right? Because there's tons of applications. They don't really mean much to you at the moment, but they will in the future. Take some time, just go through, explore. Maybe you realize something makes sense for whatever reason in one of these. Maybe you've used a program before, but that's it. That should be a day of just kind of exploring the file system. What all exists, right? If you want to get cool about navigating, go back up top and try to get back to your home user directory. So I'm going to type in that /home/ and then it's SavvyNik. What's nice here, it auto kind of fills in for me, and now I'm back to my regular home user location. I can also just exit out at any time if I get lost and click files, and it'll load me back into home for the current user. Now that I've gotten past that, I'm ready for one of the most exciting parts. And I want you to spend a couple days now installing and uninstalling applications that you may or may not like. Find the software or app store. Either type in store, that usually loads things in, or application, app, or software. One of those will more than likely find what you need, and that's a software store or app center. Look at that. It says add, remove, or update software on this computer. This is where we start having a lot of fun finding new applications to use and install on our systems. And the 3 Linux distributions I mentioned all have their version of this store. This is where you can explore and find applications. You want to install Discord on here? Search for Discord. Look at that, Discord. That's it. Install. I can also choose different variations of the install. Don't worry about that. Just choose the default one. See if you can get things installed and if you can use the application that you want to install. You want to program later? Do you want, let's say, VS Codium? Or, sorry, that is available, but maybe we can see if we have Visual Studio Code, since more of us are going to be familiar with that. Sure enough, Visual Studio Code's available. I can install that on my computer. Let's see. A good one that a lot of people might do is you might want a different web browser. So what if I want Firefox, for example? Type in Firefox and find it. Firefox here. Great. Just going to hit install and let this go through the process. And at least install one application so you understand how the install process goes. Because we also want to uninstall our applications later so we understand how to do that as well. I'm going to let this go in the background for just a moment and install it so I can show you how we can launch it after the fact. It can be one of those things that you watch a lot of videos and it seems very daunting to use Linux, like you got to use a terminal to install anything and learn a whole bunch of commands and understand what the terminal is telling you. And it just becomes a mess when you're watching some videos where people are trying to show you everything through the terminal. Know that it's just as easy. It's like using the Windows or Microsoft Store, whatever the heck they call it at this moment, but it's really just that easy. And I exited it out of the store so I can now show you that once it's installed, I just type in Firefox if I'm searching for it. Look at that. It's on my system. That's how easy it was. I just launched it and here you go, a brand new launch of Firefox. If I'm more comfortable using Firefox, I'm gonna find a way to replace Brave web browser with Firefox by pinning it. For example, right click, pin to dash, and now I can focus on uninstalling Brave if I want to, or unpinning it. But that's not what I'm gonna do. I actually like using Brave, so I'm gonna uninstall Firefox. How do I do that? Well, it's the same place. Find that software store, launch it, click on installed, look through all your installed applications. There you go, I found Firefox. I can click on it, open it up from here, or hit the delete or uninstall button. It's gonna give you an option here in Zorin. I'm gonna delete everything permanently, including the data that comes with it. Sometimes the system can save configuration files just in case you wanna come back and reinstall Firefox. You don't lose all your settings, but I want it completely off my system. Have that choice. I'm going to hit uninstall and watch it uninstall and verify that it is uninstalled at the end of this. We're going to spend a few days working through our app store and getting used to using it. If you can't find an application, write it down, and then we'll have to spend some time exploring the web to find out if it even has a Linux version available of that application. If it doesn't, then that's where things get a little harder, to be honest. But we first want to start seeing if we have all the available applications that we do want to use on our system available to us through the App Store, because that's the absolute easiest way to install things. Now I'm going to exit out, and after we've spent a couple days getting comfortable with that App Store, again, we're in week 2 now. We're probably about 4 days in or so. We're ready to get back into the terminal just for a moment and just run some very basic commands. Also, do not burn yourself out. If we're talking only like 10-15 minutes a day, just exploring things, trying to open up new applications, learn about the file system, learn about the layout, get used to the layout, find settings, change things around so it looks better for yourself. Again, don't spend too much time every single day. 30 days is a lot of time. And if you miss a day or two, it's not a big deal. You can get back into it and redo some of the steps from before if you're not comfortable yet. A surefire way to stop using a new operating system is by letting it get too daunting or approach too many things all at once. Instead, spread it across a long period of time and take your time. So we know how to get to terminal. We just type in terminal, find it, open it up, and now we get this blinking cursor again. Just gonna make things a little bigger for us so we can all see better and maximize this thing. So we did a little breakdown of what the file system looks like, right? So I'm gonna show you a few commands. If you type in pwd, that stands for print working directory. That shows you where you're currently at in the terminal. Notice something, home, SavvyNik. Isn't that a familiar location that we already covered? Yes, it is. It's the home users directory. That's where we are typically at by default. So to illustrate things, I'm actually going to put things side by side here so we can understand what we're looking at over in the left-hand side, the terminal, versus the right-hand side. Notice I'm in the home SavvyNik directory. We're in the exact same place between these two. Very cool. Well, why can't I see these folders over here on the left-hand side? Well, we can with a different command. Type in ls, which just stands for list. Now we have something interesting. Desktop, downloads, pictures, templates. Well, desktop, downloads, pictures, and templates actually show up over here on the right-hand side as well. What you're viewing is the directories inside of the home SavvyNik directory. pwd shows you where you're currently at. ls lists the contents of wherever you're at. You just learned 2 massive commands in Linux. I'm going to teach you a third one now, which is cd, or change directory. Let's say, for example, I wanted to go into the documents directory, right? We have this myfirst.txt in here. How do we do that? cd space, and then I type in documents, right? Because it's available. Documents, and then I press enter. Notice I have this documents here, but I don't see myfirst.txt. Why? Because I didn't list the contents of this new directory. If I type in ls and press enter, look at that, myfirst.txt. Fantastic work. You officially have navigated to your first directory in the terminal. You've done more than enough at this point with the terminal, but now you're dangerous. You can actually use CD to get around the system however you want. If we do CD ... that just goes back one directory. So I'm going to illustrate this. I'm going to press enter. And then effectively what I've done is from documents, I've clicked home. And to prove that, I type in ls list, and this matches this as well. Great work. So I can go back even further, CD ... Where does that take me? Well, delete this. This is what I should see. Do I see it? Sure enough, SavvyNik, SavvyNik. Let's see one more directory back, right? Remember what I said slash was? Root. Press enter. And then I'm going to do the same here. Back. And then I just have the slash. I press enter. Look at that. I should see all these. Do I? ls. Sure enough, I see all the same folders inside this directory. Now, if I did CD and I typed in home, that's like clicking this right here. I should see SavvyNik. And now I'm officially navigating up and down the tree or the branches, directories, whatever you want to call them, to the root location. Fantastic work. We don't need to do anything else here. Let's just go one more directory up to your home user directory, type in whatever user you have, and now you're back to square one where we were at. You've officially navigated through the file system. Congratulations. This is a big step. And just get comfortable using these few little commands. Again, pwd, print working directory, ls, list, and cd, change directory. You don't need anything else here. If you want to get fancy again, type in clear. That just clears everything out, starts fresh. Type exit. That just exits out of the terminal. I'm going to do it myself over here. And that's it. Week 2 is accomplished. You don't need to do anything else. Just do some basic daily tasks, watch YouTube, try and get some pictures on the system, open those pictures up or save them, create a text document, plug and play with USB drives, open files up, navigate a little bit, look back at your settings, maybe change out some fonts, explore new applications, see what's available in your app store. You're past week 2. And now we're ready for week 3. Week 3. Before we get into week 3, I do have a Linux checklist, cheat sheet, and mind map all available for download at SavvyNik.com. That is a way more extensive guide into how Linux works, all the commands that you have available, a breakdown of those commands, how the system looks, and all the little operations behind the scenes. It's a little more in depth, but once you're finished with this video, it's a really good place to start next. I just want to let you know that does exist. Again, check it out at SavvyNik.com if you're interested. This should be plenty of work for the first month though, so let's focus up back on this. Week 3. Now our goal is to explore what other ways, instead of the App Store, can we install our application. So that's going to actually be using the terminal again. Another deal is to update the system safely. And finally, I want to install a few useful tools, or what I consider useful, on these Linux distributions that will just help your experience a little better, because it can get a little confusing if you don't have them. So earlier we installed Firefox, right? And that was through the software store. You should be very familiar where this is located now, but we had to click the search button, type in Firefox, find a package, click on that, click install, let it install, all that fun stuff, right? Well, what if I said there was an easier way? This time, let's go back. We're familiar with the terminal, type in terminal, load this up. Again, I'm going to make things bigger so we can see it. I'm going to put it over here on the left-hand side and then put the App Center over on the right-hand side. So what's really cool about Linux in why a lot of devs use Linux is just how easy it is to install things. For example, if I wanted to do all that work in the terminal, I can do it pretty easily with just a few commands. The next 2 or 3 sessions, I want you to get used to how to install and remove applications through the terminal. Now, this can seem like a big step, but I think you're going to get it pretty easily. You're in week 3, you're comfortable with your system right now, at least navigating, installing applications. Why not try to do it through the terminal? So now I'm going to type something new that we haven't done before. Sudo space app space update. This right here, you don't necessarily have to run every single time, but it does refresh all the packages or the package lists that are available. A package, just consider that an application for the time being. So I'm going to type this in, and for the first time, I'm going to be asked for a password in the terminal. What password is this? Well, it's the same one you use to log in. So I'm going to type in that password and press enter. It's going to look like a mess of information coming in, but just understand that these are all the mirrors getting refreshed for where you have package available from. That just means that we're updating those lists so that we can have the latest and greatest packages available to us. I'm going to type in clear so I don't have this jumbled mess on my screen anymore. After I do that, now I'm ready for the cool part. Sudo apt install, and then I'm going to type in Firefox and press enter. What's happening now is essentially what I did was I searched, I typed in Firefox, it found the best Firefox package for me that's available, and it installed. Now it shows it's not installed, right? Well, let's check. Is Firefox on the system? Sure enough, in the background, everything got done with just this one command, and that's why the terminal is so powerful. Now imagine setting up an entire dev environment with compilation capability, build tools, linker tools, all that fun stuff. For example, if I wanted to start programming in C or C++ or Python or whatever, it's as simple as typing one command and everything gets installed, all the packages, all the libraries, everything, and I can start running scripts or code or building my own applications all with one command. It's pretty cool. So you're going to be asking me, what is apt or this APT, right? Well, I don't want to get too far off in the weeds. I have a video on that as well, where it goes into depth how to install and uninstall applications from your computer. The two things I want to focus on is just what apt is. It stands for Advanced Package Tool. This is available for Linux Mint, Ubuntu, and here in Zorin, and it can help you install software, update software, remove software, or search for it. That's all you really need to know. I'm not going to get into depth here. It's just a tool that allows you to install and remove applications, also known as software, and that's it. Now it is a little more powerful than that too, because it can upgrade or update software and packages. Now I do not suggest doing it through here. You'll get a message on your system eventually that things need to be updated. We should learn how to do that though, right? So if we type in updates, notice we have software and updates, and here's where we can typically set how we want the system to update. It says for other packages, the system has updates active until 5/31/2029, and you can subscribe to whatever you want. For example, all updates. Type in my password and allow it to make the changes, and then it will automatically check for updates daily. It will download and install them automatically. And when there are other updates on a daily, you'll be asked by the system on whether or not you need to make an update. And typically you will get a prompt that comes right up in the notifications that an update needs to be made. Just do it through the operating system. Do not bother doing it through terminal at this point. You can, but it's just more complicated and you run the risk of screwing something up, and we don't want to do that. Now that we understand how to install an application from the terminal, let's do it different, right? I'm gonna clear things out. I'm gonna type in sudo space apt space install space VLC. And I'm gonna press enter. And below it's saying, oh, it needs around 150 megabytes to install this package. You're asking me what VLC is. We're gonna look at it in a moment. I'm just gonna press enter, let it install. Cool. Now, again, just to clean things up, type in clear. I'm going to search for that package that I just installed. Search VLC. Look at that, VLC Media Player. I highly suggest you getting this because it can play just about any codec multimedia file that you want. That means almost all formats of audio, almost all formats video, and it is a very awesome tool that's free and open source. I install it and use it across the board, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac, it doesn't matter. I always use VLC because it's a familiar media player. It has every codec that I've ever wanted, and it just runs great. That's all I'm going to say about it. You can uninstall it if you want, because I'm going to show you how to uninstall things as well through the terminal. Break these steps up into days. Do not do all these at once. I know it can get exciting, but I want you getting comfortable with how to install software from the terminal and start using some of the tools or applications that you've installed through the terminal. This one's important for beginners because sometimes there's applications or packages that are available through the terminal that aren't actually in the store. So it just gives you access to more things. And it's pretty cool to be able to use the terminal, especially when it's so much easier to find and install packages if you know how to, instead of going through the software store like we did in the previous one. So we know how to install, we're gonna uninstall. So I'm gonna type in sudo space apt again, space uninstall, space remove, space the package I wanna remove. I don't want Firefox on the system, I'm gonna remove it from here. I'm gonna press enter. And now it's telling me that it's going to remove Firefox. Press enter again, and that's it. It should be off the system. Let's go check. Firefox, is it available? It's searching, and it did find something, but it's just a suggestion to add it, right? If I click on this, it's showing you where to install it from. Because Zorin OS is great like that, it tries to show you where you can get things, but here it is in the App Store. I'd still have to click install in order to get it. No longer on the system. That's how easy it is to remove something as well. So if you don't want VLC anymore, you can do sudo apt remove VLC, and that's it. It's going to tell you that it's going to be removed. Press enter. Why? And that's it. VLC should not be on the computer anymore. Let's check that out. Type in VLC, and sure enough, it's pointing you to store again. Great stuff. And now we're at 3 weeks. The goal was to install applications, be able to update the system, run a few basic commands in the terminal, and we're able to do so. We've also gotten some useful tools, including VLC Media Player. We can install web browsers. The one thing we didn't do is search, which is pretty easy as well. For example, you could do sudo apt search and then just type in something like Firefox. Right? And it shows you all the different Firefoxes that are available. Just scroll up and down and you can see what's available, or what relates to Firefox, I should say. Now it's a little hard because there's just so many different things available for Firefox, including libraries that can get installed. So it's a little confusing, but here's the one that we actually downloaded. It's just called Firefox. And it says that it's going to install Firefox from the official Mozilla app repositories. If this is too daunting for you, just use the App Store. Do not bother. But that's the way to search. I'm going to clear. You just do sudo apt search and then type in some keyword for the package that you're looking for. For example, let's just say VLC again. There we go. All sorts of plugins, right? And here's VLC, the one we downloaded last time. If you're interested in that specific package and you found it, right, you can do sudo apt show and then the package name of VLC, and it tells you exactly what that package is and how it's broken down, who maintains it, what it is, the description, all that fun stuff, so you can easily look through it and make sure you're installing the right thing. That's it. The absolute one takeaway I want you to have is the sudo apt install and then some package name. That's really the most important one, and that gets us all the way through week 3. Spend time reviewing everything up to this point, which I'm going to go through real quick before we reach week 4. But if you enjoy videos like this, make sure to subscribe below and smash that like button on the way back up. Also hype the video up. Apparently YouTube wants us to do this now. Week 1, we really spent exploring our new system, the desktop, the layouts, the file browser, web browser, so on and so forth. Week 2, we spent exploring the file system using very basic commands to navigate in the terminal, creating and opening files, and a little navigation in the terminal. Week 3, we're getting pretty advanced. We're installing and using applications to terminal, and now we're ready for week 4. In week 4, nearly 1 month into using Linux, I think it's time to talk about services, logs, and creating a very basic server for the first time. This is all exciting, as we now are going to see the power of Linux unfold, and this is going to somewhat focus on the terminal. As you can start learning and using Linux past just a basic operating system, now you're going to get some utility out of it, if you want to. If you're happy with how far you've made it, stop, because at this point, you pretty much have the ability to use Linux as your own personal operating system. At this point, I think you're going to know whether or not you can get away with using Linux. One thing I will mention is do not underestimate how much you can do on a web browser. For example, if you want to use OneDrive, you just can't get away from Excel, all that fun stuff. There are ways to set that up through the web browser. Log in with whatever default web browser you have, and you can even create web apps. For example, here in Zorin OS, if I wanted something like, I don't know, Excel, I would just send it to the cloud address. So somewhere Microsoft.com, cloud, blah, 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 right? Excel. And then I would create that and it would be launched through the web browser. And I just say what type of category it is. Even if I want, I can put in some like custom information too, a description, and just press OK. And then I double click and that would launch that Microsoft tool for me in the web browser. I can put it on my desktop, all that fun stuff, right? A lot of our applications nowadays are able to run in a web browser. Again, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, what have you, and run OneDrive through here. You can run a lot of services directly in a web browser that you might not be able to get away from using on Windows. Also understand that you can run some applications directly as a Windows application. You just need to install the Windows app support here in Zorin OS. And I have a whole different video on this, so I'm going to just link that in the description below too. But make your choice at this point on whether you want to continue or not. Week 4 is really a beginner to system administration and building up your first project here. So one thing I want to talk about is services. Again, let's launch a terminal. The first day, we're going to be just exploring what services exist on this system and how to see that. All of these Linux distributions come with something called systemctl, and then just type in space status after that. Press enter, and you'll notice services running in the background. If I press down, all these little services, everything has a .service after it. Tons of services, just look through them. They're not going to make sense, but they will in a bit. Just know this status command exists. I'm going to press Q to quit out, clear to clear things out. Let's pick something that might be more beneficial. For example, I'm going to type in systemctl status, and then I'm going to type in bluetooth.service. And look at that. It says it's enabled, right? But I get a few messages. All this is it's telling us that it's running the Bluetooth service in the background, meaning it's trying to run the Bluetooth driver and all the little contents that have to run in order for Bluetooth to actually run on your system. What systemctl is it's the main command line tool, which is a control system that powers and manages all the services on your system. For example, Bluetooth is a service that runs in the background that makes sure that you can actually use Bluetooth. When the system starts up, this systemctl also starts up Bluetooth. It starts up networking. It starts up applications and different configurations. Everything really starts from systemctl. That's why it's an important thing to understand. There's a few more commands to understand here. Type in sudo systemctl. There's start. There's also stop and restart. Those are probably the main ones you need to know. And you can restart, stop, or start any service you want by just typing the name afterwards. So for example, we were talking about Bluetooth. If I wanted to restart the Bluetooth on my computer, I could do that by pressing enter, typing my password in, and that's it. It just restarted. I could also stop it. It's not working anyway, so I'm just gonna type in stop. Then I do sudo systemctl status, right? Bluetooth, I wanna check the Bluetooth out. And right now, it's inactive, dead, it's enabled, but it's off. I can also disable it completely, meaning it'll never start again. If I did sudo systemctl disable Bluetooth, that's gonna disable everything. And watch this, if I do the status now, it's disabled, it won't run anymore. It's pretty simple actually. So you just learned the basics of systemctl. You should have spent about a day searching through services, understanding what the statuses are, how to start, stop things. If you have Bluetooth, that's a great one to mess with. If you want some other ones that are safe to mess with, for example, systemctl, if we do the status of cups, cups is the printer service. So if you want to restart the printer service, you can easily work with cups. You can run that restart, stop, disable. Don't forget enable. Of course, if you do disable it, you can always re-enable it by doing sudo systemctl enable. And then, for example, we stop Bluetooth, so I'm going to re-enable that. There we go. But that's a good one to mess with. Cron would be harmless. Network Manager, that one is not necessarily harmless, but it does start and stop your network, aka your internet. So just make sure you're not browsing or watching a video when you're doing that one. Regardless, those are some you can mess with, but before we mess with those, I want to move on past the day or two that you spent with systemctl. Now it's time to look at some logs. Let's see what logs are or exist already on the system. Remember that ls command to list things out? Let's list what's in /var/log. Notice there are a few things in here, right? So a really cool one to check out is going to be something like kernel, right? What's the kernel logging? So we can access this a few ways, right? One is through the file browser. We know it exists in var log, so let's just look it up. Var log. There we go. Open that up. Where's the kernel? Open that up. And sure enough, here it is. We can view the log. Now it says I don't have permissions to access this file. Well, that's because I'm not root. So I'm going to go back to the terminal. Well, since I don't have permissions from there, I'll do, how about tail-f? I'm going to do /var/log, right? Log. And I'm going to check out the kernel log. I'm going to do .1 because that will be the latest one. And now what's happening is as the kernel is actually working on stuff and updating things and bringing messages to us, it is being displayed in the background. It's pretty cool. Well, what else do we have access to? We have something called journal. That's another interesting one. So ls var log journal, and this is where you would find the system journal log. But there's an easier way to see these. You do journal ctl, and for example, like -b will give you the boot logs, which is one of the coolest ones to check out. You can see how exactly your Linux kernel boots and go through everything from the beginning of the boot sequence all the way down to present. There's a way to look at kernel logs too. Do sudo dmessage. You can pipe that to less, and that lets you see kernel information, not just boot information, everything going on in the kernel. Another great log. If you want networking information, for example, you do journal ctl-u, and now, for example, let's do network manager service. And look at that. Now you get the logs for the network manager. So there's many ways to look at logs in here. There's per service, or you can directly go to var log and can look at logs in there, or you can do dmessage. So definitely spend some time researching how to look at various logs on the system. The few I'm going to say right away is device logs. Look that up. Look up service logs, boot logs, and finally kernel logs. Those are some of the most important ones to make sure that everything on your system is running smoothly. And once you can navigate the different types of applications that can see all these logs, or navigate and look at the actual log through the terminal, you'll become very powerful in exploring and even figuring out potential issues on your system. Not to say that there are any issues. You probably would have quit using Linux if there were issues. But if you're ever experimenting with something, these are the places to look in order to get more system information. And now that we understand how to look at logs, how to control system processes or services, we're ready to start by installing our first web server. Now, I go way more into depth in a different video on this, so I'm gonna post that in the description below, but we're gonna go through this pretty quickly because at this point, I think we can set it up pretty quickly. We know all the little different things in order to get this going. And we're gonna be using something called Apache in order to do this. So easiest way to do this is gonna be using our sudo apt command install. We're gonna install something called Apache 2. This is just a web server. That's all we're doing there. Press enter. Accept. Yep, just about to show you how fast you can do really powerful things on Linux. If you can find a fast way to do this on Windows, I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. But this is what separates Windows from Linux. Well, at least one of the things. Clear things out. Now I've installed Apache. How do I start it? Well, we've already learned this. Sudo systemctl. It's a service. We type in start Apache 2. Press that. Now it's started. We also want to make sure that it's enabled during boot. Very similar thing. Instead, we now do sudo systemctl. We make sure it's enabled by typing enable Apache 2. And now it'll start with the system. Finally, we need to open up a web browser, copy and paste in http://localhost. That's local. And look at that. We have a full-fledged web server running on our computer, and we have access through it through our local network. That is how powerful things are. We can also use a command like IPA to get our actual IP address, type this in from another computer, and we should be able to access that same page across the network. That's pretty wild. And you might be asking yourself, well, how do I go and edit something here? Well, we can do that as well fairly easily. Let's start a file browser, navigate to var www.html, press that. We have this index page. Let's open that. That's that page, right? But this is on the local system instead of through the network. So right click, open it with some sort of a text editor. I'm literally going to do the text editor. I'm going to modify some stuff in here. For example, I'm just going to take everything out of the body here. Let's go all the way. Where's the body? Somewhere in here where the body starts, hopefully right there. Okay. And then I'm just going to do, let's see, P and close the P off. That just stands for paragraph. Hello, world. This is my first web page on my self-hosted web server. Boom, save that. And it's asking me for administrative privileges because the permissions for the file are in fact of an admin. So now I go back here, just going to hit refresh the page. And look at that. Hello, world. This is my first web page on my self-hosted web server. Congratulations. You were just able to install your first server, enable the server through a service, modify a web page on the server, and view it from anywhere on your local network. That's pretty wild. All with just a few commands. This is the power of Linux. This is why people love using this thing. It's also open source and free and available for everyone to tinker with, to change what they don't like, what they like. It's not as bloated as Windows. It doesn't have extra telemetry baked in. This is why we all love using Linux. By week 4, you are now a beginner system administrator and you've completed your first little project on Linux, which is self-hosting a web server. I think a lot is starting to feel comfortable now. Congratulations on your journey. Hopefully this wasn't too daunting. I just wanted to kind of encompass how I would approach learning Linux through a 30-day period as I was a beginner myself a long time ago. I understand how things can be daunting, how things don't make sense, and how everyone says, well, just learn Linux, just get on, just install, just, right? This 4-week beginner flow has taken us everywhere from just using Linux like a normal operating system, getting comfortable with the terminal, navigating through files and folders, installing applications, managing those applications, installing them from the terminal, administering things, checking out logs, checking out services, getting used to the look and feel, and customizing things here in our own Linux system. You've come a long way, and hopefully you were able to use my checklist below to follow through. I know it's hard to come back to the video multiple times. It's best to watch it all the way through, I think, and then just follow through the checklist. And if you need certain segments or reminders of what to do, just watch the specific segments. I'm breaking it down into chapters here. I do want to know what you thought about this whole entire journey. Do you think this is useful for beginners? Did you want to explore more? Do you want another month-long plan for becoming an intermediate to even advanced user? Let me know in the comment section below. I'd love to do more videos like this. These do take a while to produce, plan out, and think about. So if you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe below. Smash that like button. We're trying to get to 100,000 subscribers. We're getting close. Congratulations on your Linux journey after the 30 days. Catch me in a great community on Discord, and I'll catch you in another video. Thanks for watching.